So, some more news in the West Ham world as I've been out and about today on some family errands, as you do. And I was sitting in a cafe in Wandsworth and I was on the One Football app, and there was a couple of stories that popped up, and we're going to get stuck into them. One of them's a little bit of a sliding doors sort of look into a parallel universe of what might have been of a player that we allegedly had something of an interest in, and we decided to go with a different player, and things turned out in possibly not the way that we would have anticipated. Let's put it like that. But I'll talk more about that later on in the video. But for those of you that are new to the channel, just have a look and see if you subscribe to the channel. If you're not, really would appreciate it if you just lend us your support. Just click subscribe, hit the bell notification, put a thumbs up on the video, and give us a hype if you've got one available. That would be amazing. So let's get stuck into the first story that I was pulled in by. Was the other day, it was put out on the social media accounts of Paco Jemez. Now, he's the assistant coach who came in partway through last season as Nuno's assistant, and he came in around the time that we had what would be considered a comparative upsurge in our form at the sort of second half of the season, from January onwards thereabout, which it wasn't enough to keep us in the Premier League, as we obviously know. Now, Paco put out a post which was rather cryptic, open to interpretation, but I think most people were agreed that the way that it read, it tended to lend itself that the club and he were going their separate ways at that point, which I think a lot of people felt was not really helpful to West Ham in their quest to get back into the Premier League at the first time of asking. As I say, when he walked through the door, there was a very noticeable improvement in the form up to that point in time. So a lot of people were quite sort of frustrated and disappointed in one thing and another by that. However, there's the story on the One Football app. It reveals that Nuno has actually given a little bit of a reach out, an orange branch, or however you want to sort of like interpret it. But Paco has had Nuno on the phone to him, and he's keen to get him at the London Stadium next season. So it would appear that possibly it may well be that Paco may well be in the dugout. Now, again, there's obviously conversations that need to be had. I dare say that there's going to be certain maybe financial constraints that the club are going to be placed under, in terms of not just on the pitch and in terms of transfer business, but also in terms of the backroom staff that Nuno can call upon. But that being said, Nuno has reached out to Paco and he wants him in the dugout by his side for the upcoming season. Now, I think that's probably a good move because, as I say, it was very, very noticeable that when the Spaniard turned up in the dugout alongside Nuno, there was that improvement, and a lot of people put that improvement down to Paco and his involvement. Now, if I remember rightly, they were teammates at one point in time. I think it was Deportivo La Coruña in La Liga, if memory serves me. That's how they know one another. So we'll have to wait and see how this particular thing plays out. Now, another story that came into focus as I'm sitting there having me bacon and eggs, this lovely little cafe in Wandsworth. Karren Brady breaks her silence on West Ham's United relegation. Well, joy unconfined. I kid you not, I saw this and I nearly spat out my cup of tea. It was, yeah. I wish she'd have just kept her mouth shut. You know, she makes the comment. I'm reading it here on the One Football app. Even though I have stepped away from my role as vice chair, West Ham is still a club that will always remain with me. Well, we'd rather it if you kept your distance, love. You've done enough over the 16 years at the club to sort of strip us away and make us a beaten husk of what we could have been. World-class stadium for a world-class stadium for a world-class squad. Do you remember those words, Karren? Do you remember those words? That was you before we went into the London Stadium, and look where we are now. Brilliant. Yeah, nothing to do with you though, was it? It was your hands are completely clear. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that. Yeah, I just can't believe she's popped up within 6 days of our relegation. There she is having an interview in the Sun of all things to say how, what matters now is how the club responds. And personally, I believe there are reasons for supporters to look forward with some optimism. Yes, it's because you're not in the boardroom, love. That's the reason. Anyway, I got to say that that really did I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I saw that article. A bit like the next one. Again, one of those sort of articles that I come across, and there's part of me that wishes I didn't come across it, to be perfectly honest with you. And you, again, get your comments in the section below on all of this. So if those of you that remember, we paid, it was around about 35 million euros, as this article goes, on, do you remember Nikola Vlašić? Now, he was a rip-roaring success, wasn't he? One of the expensive signings of David Moyes. I think it was season 21-22? It was the year before we won the Conference League, if I remember rightly. And we went and shelled out, I think, if I remember rightly, he might have even been a club record or close to it anyway at the time we bought it purportedly. It was a big money purchase for that particular moment in our history. But apparently, we was looking at another player. Now, look, all clubs have this, and we've had it before, where we've been looking at player A, and maybe we've gone in a different direction. One prime example, and this is for people a little bit older than me, is that we signed Bobby Ferguson, the goalkeeper, when we could have signed Gordon Banks. There's many examples, not just in West Ham history, but there's the one that Arsene Wenger turned away Zlatan Ibrahimovic when he was a kid, and all sorts of other ones where sliding doors moments, sort of like where you've got this little, okay, we're going to turn left at this point, and in actual fact, you discover later on that actually you should have turned right. Well, who was the player that I'm talking about that we was looking at when we eventually signed Nikola Vlašić, who had such a wonderful West Ham career? Well, as I record this, in a couple of hours from now, Paris Saint-Germain are going to be locking horns with Arsenal in the Champions League final. And the player that I'm talking about is actually in that particular match, representing Paris Saint-Germain. None other, ladies and gentlemen, than Kvaratskhelia. Try saying that after you've had a couple of vodkas. Kvaratskhelia, who previously was at Napoli. He went to Paris Saint-Germain around about midway through last season. He has absolutely ripped it up. This guy was on the radar of West Ham United, and instead of signing him, we signed Nikola Vlašić, which was a big money signing, which we ended up, when we moved him on, we lost a lot of money. Now, just stop and think about it. It's one of those what-if moments in football, in life. What if we'd have actually signed Kvaratskhelia from the club that he was at the time, which I think it might have been, I'm trying to remember who it was. It says it in this article. Okay. Rubin Kazan. Okay. He'd had his Rubin Kazan contract suspended, and he moved to a club called Dinamo Batumi. I've got no idea where that is. Haven't got a clue. Probably in Georgia or somewhere like that, I'm guessing. But yeah, I mean, go and have a look at this guy. He's 25 years of age, and he's absolutely electric. He's strong. He's quick. He's really clever footballer on the wing for PSG, and a player that, my God, if we could have got him, what could he have done? Instead, we got Nikola Vlašić, who got one goal in 31 games, and he eventually left us a couple of years later. Never really did too much in a claret and blue shirt, unfortunately. So there you go. One of those signings that got away. And like I say, look, all clubs have signings where they could have gone for player X. They instead went for player Y. It didn't turn out, and player X turned out to be Diego Maradona or something like that. In fact, I'm sure there was one that Sheffield United, as I said that, I'm sure that Diego Maradona once on the radar of Sheffield United, believe it or not. I'm sure that's right. You can go and fact check it. But anyway, you've got a couple of stories there to get your teeth into. Paco Jemez may well be staying at West Ham after all. His rather cryptic message on social media, which a lot of people have had. You know, Callum Wilson had his cryptic message out there, and now it looks like he might be staying. Paco put out his message, which again seemed to suggest he was on his way, but left a little bit of wiggle room. And now it appears that Nuno has reached out to him, and he might not actually be going anywhere after all. Karren Brady has popped up to have her say on West Ham's relegation. Thanks for that. And then, like I say, Nikola Vlašić, around the time we was looking at him, we was also looking at Kvaratskhelia, who's now at Paris Saint-Germain, about to play in the Champions League final, if you please. One of the best players in world football right now. We could have had him. We could have had him, and who knows? We could have made an absolute bundle of money on him instead. We shelled out a load of money on Nikola Vlašić and lost an absolute fortune on him, and he did bugger all for us in the time he represented us. That's just typical West Ham, isn't it? That is so West Ham. But anyway, get your comments in the section below on all of those things. Much more besides. As I say, do us a favor, check if you are subscribed to the channel. If you're not, hit the subscribe button, click the bell notification. That way you'll know of any new content as and when it's uploaded to the channel. Give us a thumbs up, chuck us a hype. Really do appreciate it, guys. And we'll see you again soon. Come on, you Irons.
West Ham are massive, everywhere we go. West Ham